Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another episode of Retro Reviews. So, we still have one more Creed review coming out next week, but today is a very special day, and we've timed this to perfection. So, the 19th of December, for anyone who doesn't know, is the date of the All Valley Karate Championship, in the film Karate Kid, and we have a certain series coming out in January, which is season 3 of Cobra Kai, and we thought, well, I mean, it's a tall order for us to get it all in that time, but we thought, why not take on the challenge and dive into the Karate Kid films? I do want to say as well, pronunciation on this word. This was a debacle on the channel about a month ago. I am probably going to periodically call this thing Karate Kid, Karate Kid. I'm going to flip-flop between the two, just getting that out there in the intro. But yeah, this is one of my favorite franchises, and as we say, like Retro Reviews is the opportunity to go back at some of these franchises we haven't talked about and give our opinions on them, have a discussion. Maybe they're films only one of us has seen. Maybe it's a franchise that someone is very familiar with, but one of us hasn't watched it in a long while. Either way, it's going to be a really good discussion today, and we're kicking off with the original 1984 Karate Kid film, directed by John G. Alvarezson. And again, it's a nice little continuation from our Rocky reviews that we've done. The original director of the best Rocky film and probably the worst Rocky film of Rocky 1 and Rocky 5. So this is going to be good today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited for this because we'll get into it. But Karate Kid, one of us knows a lot better than the other. And that being said, as we've said, it's a new franchise. We're going to do this over the next couple of weeks. So if you do like these films, do like, comment, and share. We're obviously trying to get some new people in. We know that Cobra Kai is going to be a big release. I think we've got this really good dynamic that I've not seen any of them except this first film, and Chris has. So we've got this working dynamic. And heading into Cobra Kai, I guess we've got the older fan versus someone that doesn't know a bit of vibe. So we're looking forward to that. But the next couple of weeks, we do have that. And if you want to find out when we're going to do these videos, because some of them will be live, some of them won't be, the best way to find out when we're going to do them is Facebook, Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. That's our main place where we're announcing what we do. We tend to do a couple of posts a week based on what we're doing in advance to expect over the next few days. Obviously, there's actually, strangely enough, a couple of films coming out next Friday. On 3 different streaming services, which is a pleasant surprise. It's also Christmas Day, but if you're in the UK and you're in Tier 4, you can't even look out your window from what we're hearing. So, do check out our channel. We've got a lot of reviews. And finally, before we get into today, last night we had our season finale review of The Mandalorian Season 2, Chapter 16. I'm not going to spoil anything here in case we've got Karate Kid fans that haven't seen it. But if you do like Star Wars, you like The Mandalorian, check out our playlist on our channel homepage. And of course, what Chris said, we've been doing the Rocky films, and Creed 2 review is going to come out this Tuesday, the 22nd. So a lot of new things coming forward with this. We're going to head into 2021 in a very different spirit to when we head into 2020, because we don't know what's going to come out next year. Whereas last year we did, and none of it came out except Tenet. So, Karate Kid. I'm going to jump in first because I've just spoiled that. I've, first time watching experience. I mean, I've seen this one once when I was on holiday many years ago. As everyone does, I remember the ending. Well, maybe more so the move at the ending and wax on, wax off. Two of the most iconic moments, and I never saw the sequels. I've not seen Cobra Kai, and in all honesty, I couldn't remember most of the film until I watched it earlier today. So it's been quite different for me looking at this, because I've got this fresh insight. Whereas Rocky was like, I've not seen them all in a long time. Karate Kid is, I'm alien to this, and I kind of remember the one thing I have seen. So I've got that dynamic, which I'm looking forward to.
I've watched this film probably another 2 times on top of the time that I watched it today in preparation for this review within the last couple of months, probably. Actually, I remember it got a rescreening. I think it was was it something to do with Netflix with Cobra Kai? I'm not sure. It was around that time. I don't know if it was the time that Netflix acquired it or something like that. I can't remember. But earlier on this year, anyway, they did a rescreening at my local cinema of The Karate Kid. I really wanted to see it. I love my rescreenings, especially of 80s films, especially this one. I had to rush and go and see that. And then not long after that, I think I watched it again. It's on TV all the time as well, the first one. But I watched it again on DVD. I've got the trilogy sort of combo collection in one case. And then I went through the next 2. I actually haven't seen the next Karate Kid, which is the 4th one in the franchise. So that will be brand new for me when we get to that one. Suffice to say, this is a film that I come back to fairly regularly. I know that many years ago, we did a top 10 favorite films list, which would probably change every month, every week, maybe, whatever are my top 10 favorite films. Looking at this one again, I think this one might move up to my top 10. And, for ages on the channel, I've been talking about that I've really wanted to, I was playing with the idea of maybe doing a 80s film series of videos on the channel where we got to talk about them. I guess Retro Reviews now quite handily has taken that place, and we can talk about films like this. And this is one that I've been dying to talk about on the channel at some point, so I'm really happy to get to this one. But I got to this film quite late, actually. I think I watched this in my teenage years. Can't exactly remember when. I think it was probably one of those times where I was just trying to cross films off my list. I've always had a passion for, the 80s and films that came out in that decade. And I think it was just I haven't seen The Karate Kid. Let's fire this up today. But it instantly hit me, and it's in a very similar vein to Rocky, and we'll talk about some of the links with it throughout this review. But it's a very similar structure. I've heard some people call it Rocky for kids, and I think that's kind of doing a bit of a disservice to it. I don't think it's inherently for kids. I think this one's more of it's similar. It's a sports film. It's the same director. It's the same composer. And you sent me a brilliant GIF when you finished the film, which, it's basically the same ending as Rocky, isn't it? Let's be fair. So I can absolutely see the similarities to it, but there is a different dynamic with this one. It's not so much like a Rocky mix situation. It is more of a father-son dynamic in this one, and it's a coming-of-age story as well, with karate as the backdrop for it. And that's really sort of like the plot device which changes the character and makes him, stand up for himself and find that connection. But this is just a film that just stays with me, and even more so now with Cobra Kai getting a new lease of life on Netflix, becoming, I think, really popular, in fact, since it's moved to Netflix. It was a YouTube Red series, I think. Not to talk too much about Cobra Kai, but definitely the resurgence of that, I think, has made people, hopefully makes people go back to this one.
Definitely, and I think that's a big thing with me, that someone that's alien. I saw the Cobra Kai hype years ago, YouTube Red. I got a couple of friends that were really into it. They're watching it back then. Everyone's like, this is really good. I was like, I don't even know who Cobra Kai are. And that's what it was. And obviously, I think it must have been the sort of last couple of months, YouTube got the rights. They had series 1 and 2 on there, and everyone was sharing this on Facebook. And I was like, is this new? Like, I'm sure this came out a while back, but no one uses YouTube Red. Let's be completely honest. No one cared for that service. And fair play to Netflix for going out and getting these rights, because this is a big hit. And you can imagine in January, when season 3 does drop, that is going to be their big thing for a while. As the company that drop things every week, that's going to be a placeholder for the next probably couple of months when they want to hype that one up. So that's really interesting. But in regards to the Rocky stuff, this is now that's a Rocky for kids. It's very hard to unsee, very different, but I completely understand those similarities. That there's a similar vein of it, not necessarily an underdog story as such, but this is that, like, you can watch not Ali, you can watch Rocky as an adult. And then it's kind of okay, that you see the real life themes in that. I can imagine when you're at school that it's that Karate Kid vibe. This is a kid that was bullied, and he's essentially just taken to the wing from master, learning how to fight for himself and to basically not get revenge, but just be there for himself. And I think there are some similarities, but I think there's a massive amount of differences. It's more the vibe of it feels very similar. Ironically, to me, it feels more similar to maybe Rocky 3 than it actually does of the ones that this guy directed already. Maybe that's the beach scenes, the running around the California type stuff, but I see those comparisons, but I think they're far more glaringly obvious in the other Rocky films than the ones he did. But obviously, when the music, it does sound very Rocky-esque as well, and the whole build-up, and it's an interesting comparison.
And I was trying to think, was Rocky 3 82? I think it was 82, wasn't it, Rocky 3?
Yeah.
So it had been 2 years after that. Oh god, this would have been the same year as Rocky 4. That's interesting. But actually, the Rocky, I was going to bring this up later when we were talking about the music, but you just mentioned the comparisons to Rocky 3 there. The end montage song at the end of this film, "You're the Best," Joe Esposito, that was actually auditioned for like the main hit single to go alongside Rocky 3. And Stallone turned it down in favor of "Eye of the Tiger" by Survivor, who also have the end credit song for this film, "Moment of Truth." And ironically, I think they were pushing for Survivor to have the biggest hit single of this film, but I think "You're the Best" is definitely the one that stayed the test of time and people remember the most about it. I think even the pitch of this whole entire film before it was even made was, we want another success like Rocky. And I think at the time, like John G. Alvarson, he'd had massive success with the first Rocky film, and then I think he brought out a couple of films after that that didn't do too well, that kind of flopped. So I think he wanted this film because it's like a back to basics approach for him. It's a formula that he's already made with Rocky, knows how to make it work and knows how to direct it. And it was written by Robert Mark Kamen, who I was doing a little bit of reading on. Apparently, it's almost like a semi-autobiographical film on him. Apparently, when he was 17 years old, he was picked on by a group of bullies and took up martial arts as a way to fight back against them. His first teacher believed that it should be used for like violence and aggression, and he didn't like that. So then he went to a Japanese instructor who was much more about like the calm and the flow, similar to like Mr. Miyagi character. So I never knew that about it until today. So that's kind of cool that it was semi-autobiographical. But yeah, and I think similar to Rocky as well is really just the theme of it, in that it is an underdog story in a different way to what Rocky is. I think Rocky is sort of like, sort of working class man, quite poverty stricken area, sort of streets of Philadelphia kind of thing. And he's a man just sort of lost. He wants his big break. And we feel that for Rocky because it's a completely different time of his life, different age and everything compared to Daniel LaRusso's character in this. In this one, it is very much like high school kid problems, moving to a new city, new school, and everything that goes along with it. So I can understand why people do think it's sort of like Rocky for kids, but the original certificate on this thing surprised me. The original certificate on this film was a 15. I honestly, I was watching this film thinking like this should be a PG. I think it's a 12 now. I think it's a 12, maybe through some of like, like the violence in it and stuff like the fighting, but this is not a 15 rated film. So I'm wondering if they removed a bunch of scenes, or they had to remove a bunch of scenes. Maybe some of the fight scenes were a bit more brutal, but I can't imagine how this film got a 15 rated certificate.
Yeah, 15 is extreme. I was genuinely quite surprised at the violence as such. I know this film's about karate, but I thought it'd be that here's these like big slap sound effects and the usual kind of stuff. And no, with this one, it was more of a, oh my God, this kid's been like thrown off a hill on a bicycle. He's been like held back and battered point blank. And I didn't realize like how savage this film is. Those kids felt brutal. They look like they're going to hurt. And it, all the blood, the cuts, the black eyes. I was genuinely quite shocked at that. I thought this was one of them PG. They get punched in the face and it's not there, but they just like howl that they're in pain. And I didn't realize this is more adult than I ever took it being credit. I don't know how old they're meant to be, because Logan Paul, I'm sorry, he's going to be called that. I'll probably learn his name over the next 2 films. The Logan Paul character is an absolute savage in this.
Johnny.
He's just like beating this shit into anyone whenever he wants to. And he looks exactly like Logan Paul. That's what I'm calling him, especially someone that's outside of these films, I guess. But I said, who won't be called that by the time they get to Cobra Kai? But it felt, and I think that upped the stakes and tension right a bit more, that it felt like he was being bullied, like he was being battered. Whereas if it had been this kind of like, it's been slapped around once or twice, like get over it, fight back. Whereas it's like he's coming home from school like with black eyes, cuts on his head. I don't know why. Like even the little blood bits, it just made it feel that not more authentic. So I can't say if Karate Kicks are going to do that. I'm sure they probably would. But it just, I think, added a bit of realism that I hadn't really seen. Whereas with the Rocky films, as much as we love them, to go back to it, we kind of laugh like, oh look, he just gets like punched in the head like 10 times at the start of every fight, and it's all good. And you get to round 10, and then you put the fake eyes on them and stuff. And this, I thought, is it going to be as cheesy as that? Of course, it can't be, but it felt a bit more genuine, like you would maybe get a black eye from that. Whereas the Rocky ones, it felt very cinematic, whereas this one feels very not low driven. This one feels like it's not trying to be grandiose or anything like that. This is just trying to tell the story of Daniel LaRusso. Yeah,
it's got a bit of an edge to it, and I like that. A lot of films from this decade, I was going to say all 80s films, but then obviously you just mentioned Rocky 3 and Rocky 4, and it's like not really gritty, more cartoony, if anything else. But yeah, no, I really appreciate this about the film, and like, no pun intended, it doesn't like pull its punches in terms of that stuff. But the age of the characters is interesting because Daniel looks young in this. Even when he's up against Elizabeth Shue, he looks like a baby compared to her. It's so weird. He was 22 when he did this film. Yeah, I swear this guy's immortal. Like even in Cobra Kai, he looks about like 4. He looks like 2 decades younger than he actually is. It's mental. Even the woman who plays the actress, who plays his mom in this. Let me just find her name. Randy Heller. She was 14 years older than him in this film, and it's just like, what? This is weird, but like I don't know. It's just weird. It's just something to throw out there. I know a lot of people have made mention about how young he looks in there, but they cast him, I think, on his sort of like his physicality. He was a very scrawny kid, and you do believe that he would be like this picked on kid and wouldn't be able to fight back against himself. really the thing that I take away from this film more than anything is just how genuine it feels, how heartfelt, and that's all down to we've got to talk about Mr. Miyagi, haven't we? So the late great Pat Morita, who I didn't know much about his career before this point, but apparently he was a comedic actor. He was in Happy Days, if you know that TV show, like the Fonz and everything. He was mostly in that, also starring Ron Howard, who we've talked about on the channel a bunch of times. And he was more typecast for that comedic style. And I think that the writer of the film was petitioning to get him cast, like he knew in his mind that that's who he wanted for this role. Apparently, he did some screen tests and they turned him down. And then I think he worked on the accent that he has and he grew the beard out, came back, auditioned, and he got the part. But I'm so glad that they gave him the part because I can't imagine anyone else in this role at all. And the dynamic between the two is just it's the heart and soul of the entire film, and it's genuine, and I think it's down to the writing. And I don't know if anything was improv between the two. I think that Ralph Macchio, who plays Daniel LaRusso, has this sort of like natural quality about him where he does feel very conversational. It feels very in the moment. It feels very real, the conversations that he's having. Even kind of a little bit like Sylvester Stallone kind of vibes a little bit, you know, that kind of sort of like quippy things that he says, that fast, smooth talking kind of vibe to him. But yeah, this dynamic is the foundation of this entire movie. And I think that's what the film nails the most.
Yeah, Mr. Miyagi is amazing. He's one of those people that, granted, I've seen one film, everyone knows Mr. Miyagi. He feels like one of those characters that he's etched into everyone, whether it's wax on, wax off, whatever he does. And when I was watching it again, I was like, wow, like he's so much more than the instructor than wax on, wax off. It's when you start learning about his wife. It's when you've got a bit of backstory and talking about the military, when he's getting drunk as well. I love those kind of things. And I went on his wiki.
My favorite scenes. Yeah.
He got nominated for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars for this film as well, which is fair play to it. Because when I was like, wow, I wouldn't have expected that from, maybe it's that Rocky syndrome, right? Because of how big this franchise is, there's so many of them, it's now got a series down the line. You wouldn't expect that award season stuff. Not me disrespecting the film, but at the time there wasn't 5 Karate Kid films. There was one. It was this coming of age thing, and he stole it. Every scene's in his grain. You mentioned that father-son dynamic. I think that sells it because before I got to obviously the scenes when he's instructing him, it's quite clear that it's obviously a single mum with a troubled son. There's very real themes of him having to move town to go somewhere he doesn't want to go to, and then you've also got the dynamic of his like the girlfriend's rich parents, the snob stuff, the country house they want him with the jock essentially. I loved all that dynamic, and it took me so long to click that. You know, when you think of father-son bond, you think of the usual master and apprentice type stuff, which you get a bit of, but this works better than that. Because there is very much the father and the son. There's the birthday stuff where he's giving him the gifts he gets in the cars, and I absolutely adored that. Now, I don't know where the future of this franchise goes, but there's an outsider to it that I don't know if Mr. Miyagi has kids or wanted a kid and couldn't have one, but he obviously sees a son in Daniel, and he also, obviously Daniel sees a father in him, and we didn't get too much of his father's history, so right now, you know, I could be proved wrong in like an episode or two, who knows, but I thought that was a really... That's fine. I just thought that was a really good dynamic, and I think the pair of them together, I think Mr. Miyagi still is it because it feels like a character. It doesn't feel like a trope. You know, when he's laughing, he's laughing. When he's being serious, he's being serious. But when he's screaming and angry, we always talk about the Harvey Dent "shut up" line. That like you're like, oh, like I'm going to be quiet. He has one like that as well. Like when he wants to raise a voice, it is that like sharp delivery. I just thought he was incredible in this. I loved every bit of him. Every scene he's in is delightful. I don't think he's got one bad moment or anything. He just
definitely, yeah. He commands every scene he's in, and the scene that you were talking about there, where he does get drunk and he kind of opens up about his past. That scene was originally going to be cut for time, and to me, that is a crucial scene. The entire dynamic of the entire film changes if you remove that scene. So I'm very glad they kept that in. It was probably that scene actually that got him the nomination because it's a really, really tragic scene, and you know, he talks about losing his unborn son and his wife at the time. So he finds that connection and the ability to be a dad to Daniel LaRusso, and you know, he finds the father. And you mentioned we're kind of skipping ahead to favorite moments, but we may as well sprinkle them as we go through the car scene. That gets me choked up every single time, where he says like, pick anyone you want, and it's like, it's yours, it's a happy birthday. I'm just like, so it's like, don't make me cry. It's beautiful. Like that is the heart and soul for me. It just feels genuine. It feels like, I think that the actors as well had like a really good bond in chemistry with each other. And I think it's evident. I know they're actors; they could probably play that up, but I genuinely believe them. You know, when they are having those funny moments, whenever he is getting more serious, you believe every single moment of it. And I love the side characters as well. The side characters are great fun in this too. So you mentioned the Logan Paul. I think that's the first time I've ever heard anyone compare Johnny Lawrence to Logan Paul, but I can kind of see it.
It's the hair and the jock, and you want to batter him politely.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really difficult now for me talking about Johnny's character, removing it completely from Cobra Kai and what we see in that. Totally, utterly dismantles the 80s stereotype bully character and revitalizes it and does brilliant things with it, which we'll get into when we start talking about Cobra Kai. So I'm trying to distance myself from that and think, if I saw this film in 1984 with no history of the franchise, I've got to sort of talk about Johnny in this. I think there was a great video that came out. Actually, I think it was before Cobra Kai, and I really hope the writers of Cobra Kai gave credit to this YouTube channel, because someone did like a 10-minute video combing through the entire film, saying how Johnny was the good guy and how LaRusso was like the shit stirrer and was stirring everything up. There are moments where, Johnny shows up at the moment and he's trying to, at the beginning of the film, and he's trying to sort things out, his relationship with Ali. And like this kid just shows up and starts being an aggressor. So, he knocks him out. He acts a bit, he goes a bit OTT and like kicks him in the gut and everything, but then he leaves it. And then it's Daniel who stirs shit up at the Halloween party where he lets water on him. And then that just kickstarts the whole thing again. So he is kind of a stereotypical bully kind of character. I'd say not so much a stereotype. I think the biggest stereotype is like Biff from Back to the Future, right?
Yeah.
Like a character like that. That's probably the number one that I go to. And I think that Johnny has similarities there, but there are moments like absolute credit to the actor. Oh God, what's his name? William Zabka. Because there are subtle moments, especially when he's talking to Kreese, his karate master, at the end when he says like sweep the leg, and this look like, I really don't want to do that. So there are hints there that he's not inherently bad, and he's sort of been pressured into this by his karate teacher. And even at the end as well, it's like, you're not all that bad, LaRusso, and hands him the trophy. So I think those moments do kind of save the character for me and keep it from falling completely into that stereotype role. But he serves the function. Like in this film, at least, you want to see Daniel come out on top. You want to, and when he does win at the end, delivers that final kick, whether it's illegal or whether it's not. I don't really know the rules of karate, but it's you feel it and you're happy for him. And but I'm glad that they did throw little moments in there for Johnny's character. It's not much, but it's just enough to show that kind of grey area to him, I think.
Yeah, I quite liked him in this because it starts off as I know that he's in Cobra Kai, so I know that this guy one day is going to get something. I'm going to change my opinion on him. So I knew that from the get-go, but it was that very typical American 80s teenage sort of coming of age, wasn't it? Like, oh, here's the jock ex-boyfriend that's angry. And I get exactly what you mean, because I kind of looked at this as Daniel. I was like, okay, he's the protagonist, but I didn't actually like him massively in this. I mean, there are bits where I do like it, don't get me wrong, but as you said, he pushes that button a fair amount more than he should. That the first at the beach where he's getting involved with the radio, and obviously the villain is over the top in this, and throwing him down a hill. It was basically like the Tenet truck scene, but on motorbikes and bikes from the 1980s. And it was savage, but the bit that's completely 180'd it to me is the tournament. From the semi-finals when Kreese makes him go down and basically, kick him in the leg. I'm going to get disqualified. That's why. And from that moment, I was like, okay, these aren't inherently bad people. Bar that psycho who's standing next to Kreese for the entire time, who is far too excited every time something happens. He looks a bit like Jack Nicholson crossed over with the kid from Stranger Things. I don't know his name. But when he gets to the final and he says sweep the leg, that's when I started thinking, okay, I was like, there's more to this now. There's way more to this. That is he pressured into it? Because to me it was he's had a bad teacher more so, and I think Miyagi does actually mention something previously in the film. I think that he does talk about having bad teachers, but I really sympathised with him in that final fight. And when he handed the trophy, it was like that Apollo Creed sort of like, you deserve it. Bit different. Apollo Creed didn't push Rocky down the hill. It would have been like if Clubber Lang had like given him the title at the end. I really liked him in it. I know that there's more from him, so maybe I've got a different perspective knowing that down the line he's going to get developed a hell of a lot more and get his own series lead in that. But I certainly saw the etches of Daniel LaRusso being not necessarily the most good of good, and this being a almost sympathetic villain, because we know he's probably minted, but we don't really get an insight into his life either. And I think had it been the jock with the rich parents like Biff, you get bits of it, but you never get it fully done. And I think it's left things open where I'm interested to see where it goes in the next film. But I liked him as far as the supporting character goes. He did his role. You know, if you need to be an antagonist for a film, getting to the final of that tournament is fine. I loved the reveal at the start when Daniel wants to go to the Cobra Kai school and then he realizes it's him in the mirror. Even the most minuscule moments like that, I've really liked. And I think it just added to their rivalry. But obviously, I think the instructor has the most input of that rivalry. He almost encouraged it, and I loved how Childish also got like they want to beat him up, and the instructors agree between them they won't touch him until after the tournament. That's just amazing. But no, I liked him, and another psychopath, I guess, Kreese is the name of that instructor. He reminds me of I forgot his name from Toy Story. You know, the soldier. I forgot the name of the main one.
The little green one you're talking about?
Yeah, he reminds me of him, but as a karate teacher. I know it's essentially, I guess, similar to oh my god, I've even forgotten his name from when he was in the Kubrick film. That's really bad. Sarge. Sarge.
Yeah.
That's his name.
Yeah.
It felt like, this is like him but doing karate, and I just love that repetitive. You know, like we spoke in the Creed review that it's like was it one step, one punch, one round, something along those lines. And there's this like, is it kill, no mercy, and something else. And this like 1940s Hitler training mythology, I thought that is an absolute incredible way to not just set up the villains, but your villain is a part of this school. And it reminds me of like not even Star Wars, but you know, it has like, if they're bad, they're a Sith. If you don't get good people come out of Slytherin, it felt like Cobra Kai was a part of that kind of, you ain't going to get any good people at the Cobra Kai Academy. And I loved that dynamic to it all. I think that really added to it, and I think that made the Mr. Miyagi stuff even better. Granted, didn't get much scenes with them, but just by just standing there in that school the entire time, I loved every line Kreese had. He was, even from the tattoo on his biceps as well. It was like, obviously, we get the whole backstory that he was in the military because it's all over the front of the shop. Those little things just add these details that's really evident, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, he was a Vietnam vet. Again, like I don't want to go too much into his character, like with other things that gets explained about him, keeping it to this one. But I like to think that Tom Hardy as Bane took his pose from Kreese from this, because he always stands there like this, hands on the collar. It just really reminded me of Bane for some reason. Or Bane reminded me of him, I guess, in hindsight. He is brilliant. Martin Cove, fantastic actor. The guy's like 75 at the moment, and he's in incredible shape still. He's like Stallone, like when you see him now, like it's like, well, he could absolutely still do this role. He's brilliant. He nails the role of a bad guy. He gets some of the best lines in the film, like sweep the leg. That's always the best one. Yeah, he's just brilliant, and he's the complete polar opposite to Miyagi, which he needs to be. And would you call him over the top in his role in this? You haven't seen the villain from Karate Kid Part 3. Now that's over the top. That's like comedic territory. That's just chewing all the scenery, and it's great. But I don't know. I find him he's a bit understated. It's stereotypical villain, but he plays that villain role perfectly. And you don't get loads about his character, but as you mentioned, like the little background things, like the pictures of his military days, like you get hints visually, and you know exactly what kind of character he is. You know that he's basically just doing army drills in a dojo, and that's exactly what the character is. Yeah, and even going back to like the Johnny character, we said there is that sympathy there, and you can see that Kreese is just like this horrible, this bad teacher, really. Is it the character of Bobby? I don't know. Like all the other Cobra Kai guys who hang out with Johnny. It's when he injures Daniel's leg, and he's like, "I'm sorry, LaRusso. I'm sorry. Like I didn't want to do it." And it's just like moments like that, like,
he made him do it.
For that background character who gets like 2 lines.
It's when they're pulling him off the floor, and he's like, "He told me he made me do it." I was like, "That's a bit deep for a karate competition." Like, I know they want to win, and that's the purpose of it. But even though he didn't want to do it, I was like, "Oh, is this guy going to throw it and like not injure him?" But no, obviously he had to follow the rules, and that just adds so much more to it that he went. It was an incredible move. I wish they kind of showed it in slow motion again. I probably will put it on YouTube up after, but it's the Academy, isn't it? Is that Slytherin type vibe that I'm getting with them. There, they would all do it, and it's all part of the greater good, all that kind of stuff. And I love their dynamic, all of them, and the fierce loyalty. His little squad of hooligans as well. It's the ultimate '80s thing, isn't it? Like you've got the jock, and you've got like his supporting his sidekicks and all that kind of stuff. It epitomised it, and I think that just adds to it, especially when you get those Mr. Miyagi moments when he obviously like, does he break one of their arms? And obviously he just batters all of them.
Yeah. I love that moment as well. And this is really interesting though, because I know you've seen this film before. It's, however long ago it was that you saw it. So, but watching it again, it was pretty much like watching it like the first time, like completely new. It's really interesting to hear you talk about this film though, and seeing actors in recent stuff now and going, oh, that's the person from that. So like you were watching this film now in hindsight, and we've got the character of Ali played by Elizabeth Shue, and you're like, oh, that's the woman from The Boys. Whereas I had completely the opposite effect watching The Boys. I'm like, oh, that's Elizabeth Shue from The Karate Kid. So it's interesting seeing you pick up on stuff like that. And I don't know if you will in the second and third one, because there aren't really any like major names, I don't think, in any of the sequels. But she's great in this. I think this was her first film. And when you see her paired up with Daniel LaRusso in this film, they do kind of look like an odd couple. I think their chemistry, yeah, exactly. I think their ages would have probably been about the same, though. That's what's mad. Like, how is he 22 in this film? It's insane, because I think she was at Harvard at the time, I believe, when she was filming this, and she was sort of like filming it in and around then. But this was her first film, and I think it's the best love interest out of the trilogy. They write her out quick at the beginning of the second film. They dodge that bullet and get around that really quick. And I like their dynamic. There is a bit sort of like the teen drama, but it is a film directed at teens, so you are going to have some of those like relationship dramas and everything. It's what you go through at school and things like that. So it's fine. It's just seeing them together just looks wrong. She does seem a lot more maturer than him in the film. So maybe that's why it's not to this extreme, but a little bit of sort of like Anakin and Padme from Phantom Menace vibes a little bit, maybe, in terms of the ages.
Yeah, this is what threw me. So because I know that's the jockey's on the motorbike, he's this, and I was like, she looks about probably 18, 19, and Johnny does as well, and Daenerys looks about 14, 12, 13, like maybe, and it's kind of, I'm assuming they're near the same age, but it's that juxtaposition, and then it's enhanced by like he's on a bicycle, they're on motorbikes. Even that added to it, I was like, they're literally just picking on this child. Obviously, and the problem is they are all meant to be nearer in ages and stuff, and I think there was really good chemistry there. I'll say that it felt very natural, but it just at times felt a bit like, oh, he just looks a lot younger, and like, yeah, I think that's what threw me more than anything. I think he's actually older than her in real life, which is just 180 all for me. But I thought she was great in it, and it's kind of what I mentioned, like. Not to be rude, we don't really know. Obviously, people do age, but like the lower half of her face looked like the exact same from this than in The Boys. I know that she looks pretty much the same anyway, to be fair, but it was really weird. Like normally, when like actors and stuff age a little bit, you might spot it in the face, but it was just surreal. It's just like it's like the Batman, like from not it's like the cowl, it's still the same. But I thought she was good in it. I'm intrigued to see, because you messaged me about the second one they write out. I'm now intrigued to see this, because I don't know if she's come back to Cobra Kai. I don't know if she will or if she has or whatnot. So, there's things to find out. But I'm very excited to sort of see where all these characters are. Obviously, not really her because she's not in it, but it felt exciting enough as an entry point into a franchise. We've got it's again when we spoke with the Rocky ones, right? It's like I loved watching Rocky and Adrian and Paulie and Mick and Creed, and it's like I want to take these group of people and see what happens to them next time round. And I don't know if we're going to get that, because I'm assuming we'll get most of them in, but. It's very strange to go through an old franchise I've not really seen, so it's also exciting.
It's I can't talk about it. It's a weird structure to the trilogy, really, because the second one picks up straight after this one, like for the first 5-10 minutes, like straight after the tournament, and it feels like that Rocky 2 vibe where it picks up immediately right after the last one. But then it goes in a whole different direction. And then the third film kind of goes back to the Cobra Kai stuff and Kreese, and it feels like, well, maybe that should have been the second film. The third one should have been the second film, structurally moving into the next one, and then the one where it bombs off and does something completely different should have been the third one. It's a weird structure to it. I don't want to talk about it in depth because I know you haven't seen them, and I don't want to sort of give anything away, and I also can't talk about any possible reveals or hints in Cobra Kai either. there's some stuff there. That's all I'm going to say. But let's talk about the music, because we're talking about Rocky comparisons here, and it's reuniting John G. Alvarez with composer Bill Conti. God, which is my favorite soundtrack, Rocky or this? I love the music to this though. Especially I don't know what the track's called on the soundtrack, but it's the one where Daniel's training and he's practicing his balance on the boat, and you've got like the sun like shining from the sea. It's like a beautiful shot. And the soundtrack all the way through this is again where the heart and soul is driven in a film, and I think that Conti nails it. There's an instrument, I don't know what the instrument is. It kind of sounds like a panpipe. It's like that Eastern kind of instrument. The same guy who played that panpipe is the guy who was used in Kill Bill 1 by Quentin Tarantino. You know the end song when she's in the plane at the end and it finishes the end credits? It's that same guy there. So it's that Eastern influence there with it. I love the soundtrack to this. Not just the actual score by Conti, but like the soundtrack in general. We've already mentioned You're the Best. It's one of my go-to gym workout playlists whenever I'm running on fumes. It's like play that, it's like, oh no, I've got some more reps in the tank. It's just, and this is why I love some of these 80s films. It's just, especially films like this or Rocky, because they do get you pumped. They really do inspire you in some way. After I finished Cobra Kai, I was like, for a moment, and then I kind of snapped out of it. I was like, maybe I should like take up martial arts again. I was like, no, I've got I've got too much stuff going on. I can't. But even just to have that idea and to inspire you in some way, and I'm guessing that's what. I think this was like the most rented film of 1985, the year after. It was one of the most highest grossing films of 84. So I think it connected with a lot of people. And also the soundtrack too. Cruel Summer, Bananarama, absolutely love it. What else? Young Hearts by, is it the Commuters, I think? I don't know. I'm trying to remember now back to like my phone, what I've got on my phone. And then Survivor, as I mentioned, like the end credits. I love this soundtrack all across the board, really.
I didn't get as much a kick out of the soundtrack as Rocky. I think because Rocky is something I'm so familiar with, that's probably why I probably got the Rocky one a bit more. But the thing we spoke about, You the Best at it, that's what's blown me away. I genuinely was convinced that was a normal song that was released in the 80s that was being used. Until before this review, I went on his wiki. I was like, oh my god, this was made for the film. That's what's throwing me. In the same way that when I reached a certain age, I found out that Eye of the Tiger was a Rocky song. It wasn't a song used in Rocky. Then it's technically the same thing, but do you know where I'm coming from? That it's I thought it was just used in the film, not necessarily created for it. And You're the Best had that for me, and it fitted for this film perfectly. I didn't notice the normal score as much throughout.
Maybe that will come with the
I can't,
when you get those themes repeated, maybe.
That's what I'm saying. I can't really fault it because I didn't have any issues watching it. Nothing stood out like a sore thumb. There was always the right kind of tone on the scenes, but I can't put my finger on the specificity of it. I always pronounce that word wrong. It's really annoying me.
So just remember back to Inception. That's the only film that I know that uses that word.
Yeah, it's just one of those really random. I think I used it twice in a week now, which is ridiculously rare. The soundtrack's fine. Again, it is that Rocky comparison that you haven't just got the same director, you've got the same composer, and sideways point thinks Indiana Jones, right? I'm guessing when people think of Indiana Jones, it's like, okay, it's the guy that did Star Wars, and it's got the guy that did the Star Wars music. People do make comparisons, which is the craziest thing. Granted, there's really nothing in common. There is that vibe that there's those similarities within the production, and you can see that on the environment. And I think that's had a big effect of how it's turned out, and that's a positive thing. I think those two combining for this, obviously we spoke about in the Rocky reviews. Obviously, that's why Bill Conti didn't do the scores for Rocky 4, was because obviously doing the Karate Kid. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it. I think the soundtrack's fine, but I think it's something that will come into it as time goes by when I see the next couple of ones.
Yeah, definitely. I think that probably out of the three, again, because I haven't seen, I know that Conti also does the soundtrack for the next Karate Kid as well, which I haven't watched yet, but I think 3 probably has the best soundtrack. It just seems like the one that's got the most power behind those themes, but we'll see as we go through them. That's what the exciting thing is, because like I get to see your first time reactions to them as well, and then who knows what we're going to review after that. Maybe it's something that I haven't seen. It's that good dynamic. Favorite moments, Christ. I will say this is probably like one of the most tightly written screenplays that I've seen, just in terms of things being hinted at, even just like the smallest things. Like at the beginning, during the opening credits, you see them, Daniel and his mum having to do that thing where the car won't start and they have to sort of get out and push and then like fire it up and jump back in. You see that in the opening, and then it gets a payoff later on in the film, which is used to show that the change of sort of, I'm not going to say class, but like the wealthy side with Ali, where they have to do that when he's taking her on the date, and it really embarrasses him. You've got the magic hand thing where he fixed his shoulder, then used again at the end. So like it's such a good film in that how everything is just planned, and even some insignificant things we talked about, like Crease with the pictures in the background, but it influences the character. It's just brilliant. Favorite moments. I've mentioned the bit where he gives him the yellow car. That really gets to me every single time because it's just so genuine, and it's just that's definitely one of my favorite moments, I think, in the film. Oh god, what else? The ending, the ending always gets me. Like every single, it's like Rocky. Like obviously the ending is very similar to Rocky, and maybe that's why I have that connection. But you just have that build, and it's the final freeze frame on Miyagi's face that does it for me, where he's got like the single tear, and it's just like the approving like smile, and then it just ends. Then it fades out to credits. That always gets me. They're probably two of my favorites. I'm trying to think of any other specific ones, maybe. I don't know, if you tell me some of yours, maybe another one will come to me in a second.
Obviously, the karate tournament, I guess, goes without saying. It's the finale of it. It's had this. This is what was really interesting. It didn't have this gigantic build-up of this is happening, because that Rocky comparison, I think I texted you that, a boxing match needs to be grandiose. It needs to build up. It needs the arena. It needs everything. This is a simple. These guys have bullied me. How can I show that journey? And really random side piece. What I loved, it wasn't just Cobra Kai versus Daniel LaRusso. There were other karate schools in that, and it's like, okay, the semi-finals aren't three from the same four schools. It's plus him, it's different, and I liked that angle. But overall scenes, it's the Mr. Miyagi's scene, the birthday scenes I really liked. Before the car and getting the car, I liked both. They had a lot of dynamic to it. I'm trying to think. It's pretty much anything Mr. Miyagi in it.
I was going to say the drunk scene that we mentioned. Oh, another one that I like, again, another Miyagi scene, is where I think Daniel kind of snaps after he's been doing all these chores for like week in, week out, and he just finally snaps and he says like, look, I'm just doing your handiwork here. I'm just your slave, essentially. And he's like, show me paint the fence. And he's like, no, show me. And then he proves that, no, he has actually been, it's kind of far-fetched. I get it. It's fine for the film. He'd get his shit snapped in like 2 seconds if he was at a tournament, even after 2 months of training. But it's like when it starts to clock on and he goes through all the moves and all the things he's been doing, and then it's like, oh no, he's not just some crazy old man that's just been lazy and letting you do all of his work. He has been teaching you something. That just gets to me. And I think I love how Ralph Macchio plays that as well, because you see like him, like a little smile starting to curl, like, oh no, I have been learning this. So I do love that scene as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what adds to the Mr. Miyagi being the wise thing, is that he didn't just sit him down and say, we're going to do X, Y, and Z now. It was this painful build-up, and it's heading somewhere, and he's got his Hawaiian shirts going fishing. I loved all that kind of stuff, but that scene sells the Mr. Miyagi, I think, legacy. That it's how many films do training instructors differently? Not many, and that's probably the most out there one of the most iconic ones, which definitely adds to that. Because Wax on Wax Off is one of the most famous cinematic lines, I guess we could say. And it's that realization, and it's when he then just starts going in at him, and he's being able to defend it. It reminds me of, like, I know it's a long way away, very different. And like the Matrix, he's like, oh, I know kung fu, and suddenly he can do it. It reminded me of that in like a good way, because it is this build up. It's the patience of the apprentice, and I loved that, and that just really kickstarts their dynamic to take it that one step further. It's that trust level that he's actually been doing good for me the entire time, not the other way around.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of it's all Miyagi moments. I love the bit where he's trying to catch the fly with the chopsticks, and then LaRusso kind of does it really, really quickly, and Miyagi's just been there like, fuck's sake, like, I've been doing this for years, and this kid does it straight away. And the bit at the end as well where he steals the belt. Where he's like, you need a belt, and then he's like talking to the guy, and he just like quickly like nabs like a black belt or something, doesn't he? He walks away. There's loads of good little character moments. It's just brilliant. So if I give my overall thoughts, this is without a doubt, I think it probably would be in my top 10 now, the more I think about it. It's a film that I always come back to. It's a very, very easy watch. It's a tried and tested underdog story, and that's why they went to Alvidson, because he knows how to direct them, and he did a masterful job. He's got 2 brilliant sports underdogs films under his belt with the original Rocky and the franchise of this. Comparing it to Rocky, though, Rocky feels like it could have been a franchise, and it obviously is, with the legacy of the character, and we see them moving from sequel to sequel. Karate Kid, I'm very glad that it is now. I mean, it has its own Wikipedia page now. We talk about like the Rocky lore, and all these characters that show up and everything's connected. It's like it's the same with Karate Kid now, and I never thought it would be that kind of franchise. This is easily the strongest film out of like the main trilogy. But it does feel like a franchise that was maybe made for profit. I know that most franchises are made for profit, right? If the original does well, then they'll peddle out the sequels. But it felt like there was more room to grow with the Rocky films, more so than Karate Kid. So I'm going to be interested to see what you think of 2 and 3. I haven't seen 2 and 3 all that many times. I think I've seen each of them twice. So I don't know everything about them. So I will be watching them again in preparation for the next few reviews that we do on here. So maybe even my opinion will change on them. They'll either go up or down in quality to me. But this is just brilliant. It's one of my favorite films. It's beautifully written, fantastic chemistry with the acting, amazing soundtrack. One of my favorite 80s films. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, as someone that's new, I really enjoyed this as a re-entry point, I guess. I remember bits of it, not a lot of it, and there's a different dynamic and it feels different from those 80s school films, the coming of age ones. It felt a bit more personal to the characters rather than the environment they're in. And as far as sort of that student-master dynamic goes, I think it's one of the best there's ever been, and that's off a first, like a recent first viewing. So I'm excited to see where it heads, where we're going to be heading towards. But as an entry point to the Karate Kid franchise is probably the best term, and not saga. But I'm excited to see where it goes, because this is the thing, as you said, you look at Rocky 1, right? The rematch is the obvious step. Where's it going to go? I don't know. I don't know what's obvious and what's not. So I'm intrigued to go along this ride and figure out what is and isn't working, or if it does all work. But yeah, it was a solid film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how long will we have to wait until the second one? Christmas Eve, we will be back with our review on the Karate Kid Part 2. I'm looking at the schedule right now, folks, on my phone right here. Oh my God, there's so much on here. Okay, so we've got Creed 2. That will be coming out on Tuesday, so don't miss that. Again, another sports film, and that will be our final one of the Rocky franchise. Put a full stop at the end of that. We're going to be ranking the films as well at the very end of that. So we're going to be discussing the film, finishing with our overall rating system on all the 8 Rocky films up until that point. And yes, if you would like to see the next Karate Kid film review that we're doing, that'll be part 2. That'll be coming on Thursday, Christmas Eve. And oh boy, we've got a lot of other content coming out. We've got to get them in, folks. We've got a lot of things to get done before it's all edging on that Cobra Kai season 3 release date, that first week of January. That's why we're having to just like pack everything in. And it also doesn't help that there's 3 films, coming out Christmas Day. We'll have reviews on that probably on Boxing Day. Essentially, guys, we've got a lot of content coming out, and the best way to stay updated with all of that is to follow us on our social media. So if you go onto Facebook, it's at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. I'll just bring them up real quick. There we go. Oh, sorry, there we are. And if you'd like some of our merch as well, we do have a TeePublic link in the description down below where you can pick up some t-shirts, including this one. We do have a couple of other designs on there, so feel free to check that out. This has been a blast discussing this one. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a film that I really wanted to talk about on the channel, and I'm really glad that we're taking on this franchise. And who knows what we'll be talking about next. Maybe let us know some of the things that you'd like to see us review in the future as well. That'll do it for us today, folks. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.